We're going to move on to our next panel discussion, which is a view from on the ground in Shanghai. While New Zealand's borders may have reopened, the situation in China is quite different. And this has caused manufacturing and supply chain disruptions for many New Zealand businesses that we've heard about today, and those living there have had to endure an ongoing risk of further lockdowns. So to tell us more about what it's like on the ground in China right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Andrew White, who will moderate this next session. Andrew is Regional Director for Greater China at New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and looks after NZTE operations and relationships in China. Today he is joined by a panel of business leaders in Shanghai. And a reminder to keep those questions coming through. I'll pop back up on stage a little later on in the session to pass on those questions to the panel. Thank you, Andrew. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Daja hao, kia ora tātou, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to lead this panel discussion today. And we've got 4 panellists here, which I'll introduce shortly. As Tim said, the idea is to bring you a perspective from businesses. We've got teams on the ground here in China, what those teams have been going through in recent months and here and now, and also what the outlook is across a range of topics. So if I could first introduce the 4 panellists. I think everyone's in Shanghai. Despite my Shanghai background, I'm actually sitting in Beijing today, but I'll introduce everybody. First of all, Elizabeth Reid. Elizabeth is the General Manager in China for Synlait, and also the Chair of the New Zealand Business Roundtable in China. I'll come to you shortly, Elizabeth, and the rest of the panel to say a few words of introduction. Next, beside Elizabeth, there's Tara Tan. Tara is the CEO of Grin Natural Products. And then we've got Lawrence Wang. Lawrence is the CEO of Vista in China. And David Boyle. David's the CEO of Primary Collaboration New Zealand. I think we have close to an hour, of which we will probably go with questions that I'll pose to the panel for about 35 to 40 minutes. And as Tim said, there should be time for the room there to jump in with some questions as well. Before I go to the panelists again, just a few brief things to set some context. You'll know that China accounts for around 30% of New Zealand's global exports in the year ending May 2022. In the period January to May, in those 5 months, was actually about 28%, with dairy and forestry down a little. In contrast, New Zealand's the 34th largest source of imports for China. There are some headwinds, and Tim, you've mentioned a couple of those. There's COVID, there's supply chain disruption. There's the fact that China's unlikely to reach its 5.5% GDP growth target as it prioritises public health ahead of economics in its COVID response. Consumer consumption's a little bit depressed, and the real estate sector's been struggling. And I think there's a general feeling of caution amongst consumers as a whole as the unemployment situation remains but unstable for some generations. It's been difficult for companies to travel to the market. And then there's also the growth of domestic brands, and we need to watch out how the dual circulation policy of China develops over time. But we shouldn't lose sight of where the real potential lies as well. There's the growth of the middle class. And one statistic I saw was that by 2030, there'll be around 123 cities in China with disposable income per capita of US 10,000. That compares to just a handful in 2020. There's new opportunities emerging with the ageing society, and the silvers market's forecast to be around $2.1 trillion US by 2030. And the silvers market will be about 25% of the population. Consumer confidence and interest in premium food products, and this is where New Zealand plays so well, remains high. And there's the opportunity to leverage digital and e-commerce to reach consumers to tell our story. So just a few words there to give context to today's discussion. That's enough from me. So I would like now to jump to the panellists for self-introductions. If you could introduce yourselves, your businesses, and just say a couple of initial words. And perhaps, Elizabeth, if I could start with you wearing the 2 hats of Synlait and New Zealand Brick. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Look, fantastic to be able to be here today and talking to you all. As Andrew said, my name is Elizabeth Reid, and I am the Chair of the New Zealand Business Roundtable in China, or NZBRIC, and the Country Manager for Synlait Milk in China. So New Zealand Brick is a representational platform. We're not-for-profit, and we've been set up to advocate and work on behalf of New Zealand businesses operating in China. This platform gives us the opportunity to both network and access people that sometimes our individual members may not be able to get to, such as both New Zealand and China government officials, business representatives, and also international networks as well. So our membership includes some companies you've already heard from today, including Fonterra and Zespri, but across a wide range of different industries within New Zealand. The Warehouse Group, Reid is our latest member, and PCNZ, which David will talk from, and Synlait as well. So to introduce Synlait briefly as well, Synlait is a milk nutrition company based in New Zealand. In China context, we're probably most well known as the manufacturer for the A2 milk company of the high-grade infant formula. And with that, we've got the exclusive license to manufacture for the Australian, New Zealand and China markets on behalf of A2. We've actually got the largest infant nutrition facility in the Southern Hemisphere in our Dunsandel site. And in China, we also are bringing in different nutritional products, milk products, and we've got an office in Beijing, which is focused on market access and regulatory affairs, and one in Shanghai, where I am, which is focused on the business development and sales support. So apart from me, all of our staff up here are Chinese nationals.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And next we jump to you, Tara. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Tara, co-founder at Grin. It is a great honor to sit on the panel today at the China Business Summit. At Grin, we support modern families to smile all around by providing sustainable, safe, and effective oral care products. And together with hundreds of thousands of families, we are grateful to be able to build a global community that is passionate about doing things that are good for ourselves, our families, our communities, and our planet. For instance, over the past few years, Grin has managed to prevent over 6 million plastic toothbrushes going to the landfill, and has also managed to donate over 200,000 eco-friendly toothbrushes to kids in need. So again, I'm very glad that I can share my journey here today, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Great, thanks for dialing in, Tara. Lawrence, if I could go to you next, please. Thank you. Lawrence, you'll need to come off mute, I think. Yeah.
Hey. All right. Yeah, hey everyone, I'm Lawrence. I'm CEO of Vista China. Vista is the total solution for software solution for cinemas. And we set up our China office in 2009. And we are the only foreign company have the certificate to operate in this section. And in 2016, we set up our joint venture with our Chinese partner. And right now we have 2 offices in China and 80 staff on the ground.
Okay, Lawrence. David's just gone off screen, but I think he's with us. Hopefully, David, are you there? Hi, David, over to you.
Andrew, thank you there. I just dropped out for 1 second. Kia ora, everybody. Daja ni hao. Primary Collaboration New Zealand is fundamentally a China business incubator for New Zealand companies setting up in China. We have 12 Kiwi companies working out at our offices in Shanghai. From the 6 original shareholders, we have 3 companies that have successfully graduated, including Elizabeth's company, Synlait, into strong standalone companies here. Silverfern Farms was another of those successful graduates, and also Kono. We provide a platform for employment for these wonderful people and national people that work in our companies, and they largely take up commercial sales and marketing roles. Thanks, Andrew.
Great, David. And sorry, just to recap, when did NZ Primary Collaboration New Zealand establish in Shanghai? What's the history? Yes.
The genesis of it was in 2012 at Stanford University, Andrew, and 2014 was when the company was up and fully rolling in Shanghai.
Great, it's almost a decade on the ground. All right. Hey, if it's okay with everyone on the panel, let's jump into some of the questions. And the first one links to, I think, your experiences during the lockdown, and I guess what you're experiencing on the ground now. I know it was incredibly tough, for people personally, and also from a business perspective during the lockdown. There's a lot of uncertainty, there's business disruption. So if you could take us into what that felt like for your business, what the impact was, and I guess some of the learnings and how you're coming out of it. So there's a few parts there, but Elizabeth, can I go to you speaking on behalf of both Brick and Synlait?
Thank you, Andrew. And look, it's probably worthwhile just giving a little bit of context of actually how the lockdown in Shanghai worked. And I lived through the March 2020 lockdown in New Zealand as well, so I've got some kind of good relative context for how that was in New Zealand versus Shanghai. And I think, as you'd expect, given that we're now dealing with the highly infectious Omicron variant, the Shanghai lockdown was quite a different level of severity to what existed in New Zealand. And I think it's quite hard for New Zealanders to really comprehend what people in Shanghai have gone through the last few months. So if we look at, for me personally, we started going into lockdowns in March, and then at the end of March we were told we were going to be going into a 4-day, effectively citywide lockdown, which didn't stop. And it didn't stop until basically 60 days later, where then we got some more freedoms coming back. During that period, as a non-essential worker, I effectively didn't leave my apartment apart to go downstairs from testing and a few odd occasions when I was allowed out. And that was the same for our people, whether they had families and kids and dogs, they didn't leave the apartment. So you can imagine the environment that people are actually trying to work in there with, whether it's the chaos of a family life or the isolation of a single person, where there's very little ability to actually go out and see people. Though I think in some ways those people who are working in some of the essential industries possibly had it even tougher, where what we saw for dairy factories, people working in the finance district and various areas had to stay at work. So again, they were looking to go in for a 4-day lockdown and sometimes ended up living in their offices, their factories for another 2 months. So incredibly challenging circumstances. And the impact of that was really, I think one of the core things that people will talk about through the lockdown is access to food. And I think that also impacts a lot of both us personally and our New Zealand businesses that were trying to operate within this environment. The logistics basically shut down. So whether you look at the packing and collation or warehousing side, where there was really challenging to get the number of staff because people who had been in a close contact were not able to access workplaces, people where they had been, and workplaces often got locked down as well, or the logistics of the supply chain and drivers and very, very restricted truck numbers, driver numbers operating within Shanghai. That's recognised as a really high point of risk of transmission. So we basically became very reliant on networks, on who we knew, and on government food packages in order to get the basics that we needed to survive. And that meant that there was a whole lot of new ways of working that kind of developed over those 2 months, and I'm sure we'll go into those a little bit more, things like group purchase. But it also meant that the mental burden on the teams working at home was really, really high. Irrespective of trying to do work, you're trying to work out how you access food. You're working out if there's healthcare issues, how do you access healthcare, and the concerns about being able to keep your family together if there was any cases of infection. So quite high layers of stress there. For business, many of those same stresses applied as well. You're working in an environment where banks might be closed, you might not be able to get invoices paid. The logistics was very, very challenging to work through to get your product into the country, to get your product across the city. And for some areas, of course, food service demand dropped down almost completely. I think it's, when we say it was hard to get even the basics, I was trading within my building to get tissues, to get sugar, this wasn't looking at trying to get high-end things. People were very excited when they managed to access some Coke, for example. So we were really down at the basics of what we're able to work through during this. And so for 70% of our members, you know, that had some really, really negative financial impacts on them through that period. Where we are now, as we're coming out of it, it's really only been in the last couple of weeks that we've started to see people being able to come together in person again, restaurants reopening. And a lot of that's been because cases are now under control and we're on a very, very different regime, which means constant testing. So every 3 days, I need to go and get a PCR test. There's a testing station at least within 15-minute walk of everyone within China, and within Shanghai, and actually I think across many other cities in China as well. So they're now looking at these new methods for using testing to prevent spread rather than looking at lockdowns, but we still have rolling lockdowns, we still have a lot of domestic travel restrictions, recently highlighted by one of my team who came down from Beijing to Shanghai for a couple of days and then wasn't able to go back to Beijing because the rules changed and she had to go to a different part of China for 7 days to basically get any marks off her travel code and be able to go back into Beijing. So we continue to work in this really dynamic environment where the networks that you have, the agility that which you can perform and the way that you can manage your team health still remain really, really critical.
Great overview, Elizabeth, and it sounds like the impact, albeit a bit smaller now, is ongoing for the team, as you say, in terms of travel and some more logistics. Lawrence, you're in the services sort of tech area. How did it play out for you in a business sense, and how did it play out for your team?
Yeah, the Shanghai lockdown period is definitely the darkest time for our industry, film industry, right? And because most of the cinema are not allowed to open, and even in some city, the cinemas opened, the occupancy is restricted at 50%, and you're not allowed to have any drink, food, face mask has to be on all the time, and there's much less Hollywood content provided. So the challenge we have is our customer have almost zero income, and same as us. So then we decide, when we have a discussion with the team, so what should we do? Then we decided diversification probably is not enough for us right now. We need transformation and innovation. We have to do something else, right? When the cinema all closed. So since 2020, since the COVID, and this year we started 3 new business units, which is a little bit different from what we operated before. So the first one is we start to do some film IP licensing. And the second one, we help our cinema customer to establish their private domain, which is help them to get their loyalty member together and try to open the online shopping mall for them, and try to get them to get their member to buy some non-film related product through our shopping mall and online streaming sales. And the last one is because of the lockdown period, then we decide we cannot go anywhere. So now we are exploring the metaverse field, because we challenge ourselves: can we create a virtual cinema? Can we do some NFT in the metaverse, since you cannot go anywhere else? So yeah, there's some learning for our business.
Okay, great. Lawrence, we'll probably come back to a couple of those points on digital and so on shortly. So thanks for putting those in. Tara, how's it been for the Grin team and your business in China?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I think for our business, I feel going through the lockdown period and the potential uncertainty is definitely just like we sitting in the exam. So why I say that is, you can never make sure, like, what are you going to cover? I mean, you cannot really cover everything before the exam. At least that was for me when I was a student. And second thing is, you never know what is the next question is. For instance, on 26th of March, that is the announcement day of the lockdown. We thought that is probably just about 2 weeks maximum, but we end up having over 2 months stuck at home. So that is to say, there's no way we can send out parcels, any parcels during the lockdown period, as we only have one warehouse that is located in Shanghai. And what is making it even worse is that we expect to have a live stream on the 20th of April, and we expect to send out probably about 20,000 parcels following the live stream. So instead of waiting, we quickly decided we need to set up another warehouse in another city. And then we had to work with the manufacturer to produce a whole lot of new toothpaste. We need to outfit them to China. We need to get the new warehouse ready. And we made all this happen in 15 days, which is unbelievable if I reflect, what we did for the past 2 months. So I guess the best learning I can take here is give yourself the best try and don't think about the worst scenario. Because all you want yourself to think about all the time is about making it happen, and doesn't really matter how the others think about it, like you're gonna believe in yourself.
Okay, great, Tara. You've touched on supply chain there, which we'll come to shortly as well. David, over to you for some comments. And I know you've got a broad group of businesses in Primary Collaboration New Zealand that you've been working with and leading.
Yes, thanks, Andrew. I suppose my reflection on it, mindful of the fact that we've got things moving, but my reflection of the first few days was, the very really real importance of our staff and what they needed. In the first place, they were looking, they were very worried about where food was going to come from, looking after their families, and so we had quite a lot of outreach going on with connecting with our own people. And then their concerns, I think all of our concerns turned to how were we going to get things moving. It was very, very difficult for people to move around the city, and also for products to move around the city. And so we started to share ideas about, transportation, trucking, what were the boundaries that we needed to get across in order to start getting some of our products, into the supply chain. And that's where, some sharing of ideas became very, very important. I think in our group, they're a really resilient group, and there was a lot of sharing ideas about how to get those things done. It was like connecting the dots of how would we get trucks around the city, and also a very important part was where were people able to buy, and therefore how do we get products to the right areas of consumption. So those are my memories of the very early part of the lockdown, and thankfully things are freeing up a lot now.
David, you're already, which is great, sort of going into the second area we're going to talk about today, and that is the supply chain disruption. How did it look, or how did it work in terms of getting products to other parts of China, or what we're hearing from companies to those second, third, fourth tier cities and so on, where the companies would be dealing as well and normally be travelling to in the course of their business?
Yes. So we tend to have taken something of a very Shanghai-centric view of it, because there's a lot of infrastructure and supply chain for New Zealand companies that is based in Shanghai. But we also need to remember that Shenzhen was locked down, Xi'an was locked down, Changchun in Jilin province was locked down, and so there's these rolling waves of lockdowns right across China. But I would say the most significant of those was this recent one in Shanghai, because of the severity of the lockdown and also because of the speed. So things locked down very, very quickly, and people didn't have much time to stock up or prepare. And the other part of that formula was that people couldn't see very far into the future as to when the lockdown would finish. And so we were like driving 100 miles an hour with the light on dip, trying to get, how to get products out to the market. But things started to surface in terms of how were we going to, start conducting business, gradually. And the first of these was the rise of the community buying groups, the Chuango. So it was a very important phenomenon for our brands to understand that nearly 20% of all of the consumption of goods through the lockdown period of time was done through our large compounds. And the key was to find a way to get our products into the hands of those community buying groups. And very quickly what was happening was some of the big distributors, like Good Farmer, Enjoying Mao and Pagoda, were then able to set up distribution networks into the Chuango, who were people inside these buying groups. So that was one area. Of course, there was the rise of online sales. So with offline retail was shut, hotels and restaurants were shut, so therefore people were buying online. And one thing that China does brilliantly is the last 3 kilometers, right, delivery to the compounds. So JD.com got moving very quickly after their big investment into their logistics systems last year. The rise of Pinduoduo, and that was a very important network for us to tap into as well. And the other significant buying phenomenon, of course, was with live streaming. So with Kuaishou and TikTok, and a lot of companies were able to actually market their products successfully through live streaming. So we needed to tap into these supply chains, pivot quickly, tap into these supply chains, and try and get our products in front of our customers.
Yes, I'm certainly hearing you had to be agile and move with China speed, as people say here, through that,
Yeah.
David.
Exactly.
Quickly to sort of in the same area, Elizabeth, and then to Lawrence after Elizabeth. Yeah.
No, thanks, Andrew. Probably one of the things that we saw across the members where the larger companies had much more diverse networks and were able to pivot slightly to warehouses or to import ports outside of Shanghai. The impact for smaller businesses, and I think David's kind of said quite a lot of how to try and work within having a smaller network, less distributed supply chains, fewer options for port of entry, and a lot of it centered around Shanghai, where you may have the product, you may have the demand, but actually connecting the two of those required a huge amount of agility and networks and connections. And I think that's where having the teams and the partners up in China has been invaluable for people to try and work through the agility needed through that period. What we're seeing from members now is, our NZ BRIC members now, is really looking at from and I think this is kind of turning into a very much a global trend, from the just-in-time to the just-in-case, and looking at having more either people outside of Shanghai, port outside of Shanghai, warehouses out of Shanghai, and very much for the reason that David said, it one may shut down for a period, the other ones may open. So how to work across those different challenges. We all saw the risk of lockdowns coming, but I think, you know, what Tara said, what David said, we never really expected it to be as ongoing and as fundamental as what we have. We hope that that doesn't happen again, but we need to be better prepared for that as well. I don't think any of our crisis management plans were really set up for what we had to deal through. So those, and I think that the connections with New Zealand became really, really important too, in terms of, you know, for Synlait, getting product into the country is the major challenge through the disruption that was led through ports as well. And I think everyone probably saw the pictures of boats sitting outside the Shanghai port through that period, the staff shortages and the challenges actually getting product into Shanghai, and then the roll-on effects that had. So we all have to think about how do we make our networks much more robust and more able to manage through some of these kind of supply shocks as well.
Okay, yeah, that sort of hedging and resilience in the supply chain and your networks, as you say. Lawrence, just quickly to you on the same topic, and then after that we'll shift to sort of the consumer behaviour side.
Yeah, so software company, people always think we don't have supply chain issues. Yeah, but we do, just in a different way. Because our revenue is directly related to the box office, so during the COVID period, you know, we just realized the film content in China is a quite concern, because right now we have much less Hollywood film was imported from China, and the criteria is never clear. And also the direction of local government propaganda department, all right, they for the last 2 years, probably the only type of film was preferred is the red film. Also, because of the zero COVID policy, much less capital are willing to invest in the film. So we see a quite big shortage of the film supply, content supply. You know, it's hard for anyone to find any easy solution, right? But it's interesting to observe how the world go in the future.
Yeah, great point, Lawrence, about it impacting across all sectors for New Zealand, not just the goods sector. So thanks for bringing that in. Hey, we'll switch to the consumer area where we're seeing lots of changes naturally linked to COVID. We're sort of seeing consumption upgrades, consumption downgrades, you know, the rise of domestic brands and so on. How's that been playing out for your business, Tara, in China, and what are your insights to share with the audience today?
Thanks, Andrew. I remember at 2020 China Business Summit, I was asked the same question. And I said, one change we see is that customers are prepared to pay extra for value. And I still agree with that today. And I want to talk about it at a more technical level. As a consumer, I think we certainly have more time for our phones ever than before. And for me, you know, I can easily spend hours on social media and I couldn't stop myself. So why I'm so engaging with it? Because it truly does have so much more diverse content. And please be aware that is a content pieces, that's not advertising pieces. So consumers engage with us through content. And one of the easiest way to build community is also through building content together with our customers. So what is content? I think a good content pieces is not to tell our customers who we are. A good content piece is to let our customers know who we can let them become. Therefore, we focus on creating content and doing things that can continue inspiring our community members to be a better humans, to be more responsible, to think more altruistically, living in this community and living in this planet. So we believe that is the way that we can create value and how we can earn, our customers' respect and trust.
Okay. Hey, building off that, David, how's your team seeing the changing environment from a consumer perspective? How's the team reaching out? Are you experiencing those upgrades and downgrades in consumption?
Yes, we are, Andrew. Consumption upgrades in food and beverage. Some of it's relatively self-evident. Things like moving towards healthy products, moving towards food safety, very important. People can trust the place of origin of their products, and New Zealand sits in a very good position with that. Home food preparation, home entertainment, which Lawrence would be pleased to hear about. Home exercise, beauty and cosmetics products are also doing very, very well, with the predominance of face masks, for example, and freezers. People are buying freezers as well, which because they're stocking up on food. On the other side of that, your question, Andrew, consumption downgrades. So for us, our fresh products have been hurt because of the lengthening of the supply chain, and it's been difficult to get products across the border and through the supply chain which are fresh, because there's just not enough shelf life remaining after the products come into market. One of our companies has just done a very recent piece of research on the changes in consumer buying behaviour, and I thought it was might be helpful to relay that. There's two key themes coming out of this, which was done only in the last couple of weeks by Rocket Global, the Rocket Apples. The first of these themes was about trust. So experiential trust, they're finding, is a very, very important part of the consumer buying decision. And that is, I want to find a product that I truly trust is reliable, but I don't want you to tell me that you're trustworthy. I want to discover it for myself. And this is an interesting phenomenon for, I think for our marketing and branding of our FMCG products from New Zealand, that we need to be able to pivot quite quickly again with our marketing messages to touch into what the flavour or the consumer sentiment is here. The second of those themes is about escapism. So this is about that desire to unlock or become free. And consumers are looking to undertake travel, to get out of the office, get out of their normal experience curve and experience new things. And I think that's also a very important message for a lot of our New Zealand brands with regard to marketing messages that they're able to put on their packaging or on their messaging, you know, for this year and going forward. The buy local part of that messaging, which we talked about earlier, is also a very important part of that content. So there's a couple of things that have risen from this recent research that Rocket have been doing.
Right, thanks, David. A couple of new terms for me too, so thanks for sharing that. Elizabeth, just quickly to you in the same space.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, I think Miles possibly earlier today has already talked to what's happening within the dairy industry in China and that move towards health wellness. I think we're all very well aware of the declining birth rate in China and the impact that's having on things like infant formula, but also the growth in the aging population, which brings new opportunities in that space. Without saying, you know, the infant formula, you've got very clearly that move from international to domestic brands and domestic brands growing, but it's still a huge market with a lot of opportunity. And I think what David's talking about, understanding what to tap into for consumers remains really, really important, what they're looking for. It's very easy to get, I think, a bit, with all the businesses going through all the challenges in the last few months and the inflationary pressures, the decrease in growth, it's a challenging period, and I think it's going to take, you know, China and a little bit, you know, globally to come out of it. But through that disruption, what we also start to see is opportunities coming through. And most of our members think that there's going to be a reasonable number of new opportunities coming through in the China market over the next 12 months as this disruption hits. And I think that's very clear. David was saying around, you know, where you can tap in, looking at these group purchase options, looking at new methods. People are investing in digital across our membership. People are investing in people and teaching people new things and looking at diversifying that demand through it as well. So won't talk specifically about the different trends, but I think the overall one is of opportunity within disruption.
Okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. And you've just mentioned digital, which is the space I'd like to explore next, just a little bit more. We'll come to you, Tara and Lawrence, in a second, but you often hear about the 4Ds quoted in China as being critical to success of doing things at China speed, deciding in China, designing for China, and digitalising in this market. So if we focus on digital, Tara, could you just talk a little bit, if it's okay, about sort of how Grin's approached that? And you've touched on some of the changes and the importance of social side in the last 6 to 12 months, but also perhaps where you see that going forward for New Zealand businesses in the market.
Thanks, Andrew. I think, you know, in the last few years, people are saying when you have a business idea, when you have a brand, you go straight to look for your angel investment, maybe say 5 million RMB, and then you have money to publish thousands of posts on social media and work with the top live streamers. And then after you spend with this 5 million, you have probably about 8 to 10 million revenue. Then that gets you to a Series A funding, and then you look to do this run again. Well, that sounds like a joke, but I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with it. But the thing is, it is not sustainable. So things change again. So one example is that all of us have been working with KOLs over the years. But the role of KOLs changed. They no longer just like a content creators. They become sales channels. So how we can constantly add value to the partnership that we have with KOLs that will truly achieve win-win. That is also a big question. That's a big question for the business to think about. For example, for the good KOLs, they care about their followers and also how much trust do their followers have in them. And that's what our partnership can support them with. For instance, the social campaign that Grin is going to launch this month in China, Share Grin, provides opportunities for KOL partners to give back to the local community. And also helps them to have a much deeper connection with their followers. So the KOLs, our KOL partners, they appreciate that and they want to work with us on that. So I believe this simply tells us one thing is given that the e-com ecosystem continues to develop quickly in China, anyone who can constantly find ways to add value to the other parties in this ecosystem will earn opportunities. So this is something I wanted to share.
Yeah, and thanks, Tara. Now, how many people in your team there would be, I guess everyone's involved in digital in some way, but if you look at specialist staff in your team, how many people would there be, if I can ask?
In China, we have a team of almost, I think, 20 people here. Yeah, and I think probably one third of us are actually there, working with our partners, KOL partners.
Okay, so it's a big investment, and you've been scaling up in that area, it sounds like, in recent times. Thank you. Lawrence, just jumping to you, yeah, any comments to build on what Tara's just said in relation to your business?
Yeah, I think after lockdown, all the businesses try to move their business online, right? From all offline to online. So it's a quite interesting thing. It's over 65% of people in Shanghai did group sale with their neighbor during the lockdown period. All right, they have to create a bundle deals and buy food together. So for me, that is a quite huge revolution. All right, because people are jumping to brand suppliers straight away. They go to, if they want kiwi fruit, they will create a bundle deal to go to this place straight away instead of Hema and San, because all other shops are closed. So I think for a lot of brands, the question you should ask yourself is, are you digital enough already to capture those deals, organize delivery, and offer a good customer service through a sophisticated e-commerce interface? Do you have a really strong shopping mall of yourself? If Hema or if Alibaba is not working anymore, so I think that's really important. Another thing is I highly recommend every brand should establish your private domain. What does that mean is right now people buy stuff not just because of the quality, but they buy from the personality. How do you engage with your customer and to show your personality? And right now the most popular way is to set up your corporate WeChat and get all your customers together and engage with them. Right now, in China, the traffic is so valuable. So private traffic is an asset for your business. And it's not just can help your business, and also once you have a decent amount of your loyalty members and your customers, and and people will put advertising revenue to you, and this open a lot of other doors for you. So yeah, that's my advice.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lawrence. Hey, panel, I'm going to skip one question and go to sort of my last area I was going to touch on, because I think Tim will want us to come back to the audience soon. But this is around sort of communication and relationships. Look, it's been a long time since New Zealand business people could get to the market. Some have made it up, but that's you could probably count the number of people on one hand or two hands. So there's that struggle, and that leads to, I guess, potentially knowledge gaps too between what's happening in the market and the understanding back in New Zealand. Now, when we were talking the other day, I sort of mentioned this in terms of mind the gap, borrowing that. I think it's the UK subway sort of expression there. So what I'd like you to do here is just talk briefly of how you've been bridging that gap within your businesses to make sure HQ in New Zealand's well informed, and also the information flow comes up. And then also, what's the role of HQ in terms of supporting teams and market through these challenging times? So just some brief comments there before we go to Tim. Maybe Elizabeth, we'll start with you and then go to David after you, if that's okay.
Thanks, Andrew. I think a lot of both my team and a lot of our NZ Group members acknowledged that it was very, very challenging during that lockdown period to really do too much for them to support, other than a lot of the acknowledgement and understanding that we were in a crisis situation. And our ability to do anything beyond the bare essentials was really minimised. So a lot of companies were asking basically the head office in New Zealand to cut out any non-essential meetings, any non-essential work. We were operating in crisis and emergency mode here. So the bandwidth for doing too much more than that, especially given the team well-being and concerns in their personal life as well, had to be really, really cut down. And I think that crisis management and joint crisis management and agility has been really appreciated. But to your point around the mind the gap, I think it's really challenging when the business leaders haven't been able to get to China for quite a long time. And being over here, and I think David and Tara both touched on this, the rate of change here right now as consumer behaviour is changing with the environment that we're in, with it's hard to explain how fundamental lockdown has been in terms of shifting behaviour, shifting networks, shifting buying patterns. So it's really trust your teams, listen to your teams, and understand the agility that's required up here right now.
Okay, great. David?
Yeah, I think I'd re-emphasise, Andrew, severity and the speed of the lockdown here meant that so many things changed very, very quickly. And that was at the consumer level and also at the supply chain level, which we've talked about quite a bit. And it was difficult, when it was difficult for us to understand how fast things were changing, then of course from the outside, from our New Zealand HQ's point of view, it was maybe magnified, that misunderstanding was magnified by several times. So it was really important that we had fluent lines of communication to and from New Zealand in order that we could re-establish commerce and get things moving again. Our group have talked about this internally as being a very, very important part of how much they have always enjoyed New Zealand managers being here and how they could establish or continue decision-making together, face-to-face. So being in a cubicle on Teams or on one of the video conference channels does not substitute adequately, I think, for the face-to-face conversations and good planning and strategic decision making, and they miss it. They miss the interaction, the fluent interaction with the New Zealand headquarters. We've tried to work both ways between our board and also the team members here, with live discussions around what is changing. But I think that, and it's a very good news that recently came about that the border restrictions were reduced from the 14 plus 7 days to the 7 days plus 3. And we're all hoping that will reduce, in the next short while. But I couldn't underemphasise the importance of that chance for the New Zealand companies' HQs to try and have their senior management come here, because I think it's a very important part of the success of New Zealand companies in China. Yep.
Yeah, good point, David, and thanks for mentioning that change in the border settings, which is positive. Let's hope for further change late this year or Q1 2023, I guess, but that's a space to watch. Tara and then Lawrence. Tara, any quick comments to build on that?
Yeah, I think I'm very grateful we have a global team, and our culture has always been very transparent, trustworthy, and supportive. So to be honest, I think I was a little during the lockdown, I was even worried our China team is being too tough and being too ambitious and too demanding too demanding to the teams that is located on the market. So I think we here in China we build a mindset for the team that don't wait to be helped. We have the chance to lead the change, and if we are able to overcome this, right, what else we cannot do together as a team? So that is kind of gradually make influence on the team that is based in New Zealand, in other markets, and I think all of a sudden we do see the team working together, and I guess it's really about how we can bring everybody together and overcome this together. So I think it's really about like how us as a business leader, how we can really set up a culture that we can really support each other and trust each other.
Yeah, great. Lawrence, lucky last words from you before I think we hand back to Tim to see if there's questions from the audience.
Okay. Yeah, I got great support and trust from New Zealand team, and but I agree with David. Face-to-face communication is very important. My flight to Auckland is tomorrow afternoon. So yeah, because I believe there's nothing better than have a cold beer with your New Zealand colleague over a rugby game, right? So yeah, that solves all the issues. So yeah.
Oh, good luck with that travel if you've got some coming up. Great. Hey, Tim, sorry, we've probably got about 10 minutes to go here. Can we pass back to you for a
Sure.
moment, and maybe you take questions from the audience, and it might be quicker if you allocate those questions, or
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of questions that have come in. There's actually a lot of questions asking about what life's like in Shanghai now, which I'll come to, but there's a couple of specifics in here which I might go to first. There's a question from Natasha Hamilton-Hart that's directed to Tara that says, it's amazing that you're able to get an alternative manufacturer and warehouse established in 15 days. Could you give a few more details about how you were able to do that?
Yep, thanks team. In our situation, we're still working with the same manufacturer, but I guess I remember that is probably about like 2 weeks, like sleepless nights for most of us at Grin. Not only the teammates are based in China, but also based in New Zealand. We have been trying so hard. We have people who are dealing with the manufacturer, we have people who are dealing with the logistics, and everybody's kind of understand that we only have plan A, we don't have plan B, we have to make it happen. So we've just, be honest team, I just think we just try hard and try every possibilities. To look for warehouse, to look for the logistic companies that can do the work for us, because that's a very urgent order. Try everything. I don't know if that's going to be helpful, but that's just how you make it happen. Sorry.
I'm sure we can all take something from that. There's a question here from Simon Draper, the chief executive of the Asian New Zealand Foundation, who says that one key consumer trend has been a preference for local brands. McKinsey found Chinese now prefer domestic brands for 15 of 17 categories. Is this a major risk for New Zealand? And I'll let anyone jump in on that one.
I could start with a couple of comments on that, Tim, if you like. We are also very, very aware of the buy local phenomena here, which probably stems somewhat from the dual circulation policy of internal demand, internal supply. One of our brands, I'll mention Rocket again, and the others might chip in with their own thoughts as well, have been pivoting their marketing messaging towards much more local content. So there is no doubt that there is an undercurrent of flavour about buy local, but there's also a strong degree of resilience and also strength in New Zealand branding, which we enjoy ahead of quite a number of other Western countries. There's got a lot of trust in the New Zealand brands, and what some of our best brands have been doing is localising their marketing content, and so the comment is true that buy local is growing here, but there are ways that New Zealand brands can mitigate against that with smart marketing.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you. We've got a question here from Mike Arand, who asks, how are New Zealand companies in China mitigating the significantly increased freight costs, and are retail prices increasing for products where New Zealand competes? Perhaps Tara, would you like to go first on that?
Well, I think definitely, we definitely are paying for that, and it's hard. I would always, as for our team, we would always have open conversations with our logistic providers as well as suppliers, and to let them understand probably the big environment, how it looks like for us as a business, and what does it mean to them. I believe, again, bring them on board, get them to understand, there are some challenges ahead, and we were part of it. So we have tried our best to negotiate down the rates. That is to say, I think, is to really ensure all the partners understand you are there and you have bright future, and that is a win-win for everybody. So I think by sharing, how the business looks like, what is your plan, whether, like, again, it's basically, how you can build trust with people, right? So I believe, having healthy, constant, transparent conversation with your partners is so important.
Would anybody else like to comment on that one?
I just add something from the dairy side, and very much agree with what Tara's saying, that the partnerships and who you're working with is critical, but we're also not in an environment here where what's happening from New Zealand is unique. We're in a global environment, whether we look at local dairy where their feed costs have been shooting through the roof because of some of the challenges getting the feed ingredients, or from Europe, from the US. The disruption is universal and the costs are universal. So we're all working through the same things, and the networks that we have and the way that we do that, and the partners that we work with give us an advantage, but we're certainly not in a unique situation.
There's a question in here that's actually directed at you, Andrew, and it asks, I'd be interested to hear a little from Andrew about how his role at NZTE has changed pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. What has been the biggest challenge for you?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks for the question. I think in terms of NZTE's approach and market, it's largely the same, working closely with companies, understanding what their business plans are for the market. I think it's fair to say that there's been more emphasis on those sort of digital e-commerce channels across the team, and getting the team more involved in that and up to speed. For me personally, if I was to answer it quickly, I think it's what's been touched on by all the leaders here, is around ensuring the well-being of the team through this process. That's always a focus, but it went up a level or two, as Elizabeth said, around ensuring that the team simply had food that they're supported at home. Could they operate in a home environment effectively with different generations of the family in that household, and the team's everything. So that effort was very worthwhile, and that's ongoing.
Thanks, Andrew. There is a question here asking about when is the border with China going to reopen. I won't ask that, but I might conclude by asking each of you. I quite like this question here. What are some of the positives of life in Shanghai right now? Could you each maybe just tell us something that's enjoyable over there?
Look, perhaps I'll start, and I think what we've built over lockdowns has been much better networks within our communities, within our business environments. I think, like anyone going through kind of any crisis, you build networks far more strongly because you've been through something quite dramatic together, and therefore those relationships get really strong. We are also starting to see things open up again, and so being able to get back together in person in an environment where you're not worried about catching COVID, because effectively in Shanghai we're down to a zero COVID. There's just a few cases coming through a day. So we're also starting to see life coming back to normal, being able to get out, go for a drink, see each other, and that's always a big relief after you've been through a few months without it.
Yeah, thanks. David, would you like to add something?
Yes, Tim, I could segue straight off what Elizabeth was saying there. I think at a level of the camaraderie that was formed between the leaders of the Business Roundtable, for example, one of the highlights of every week during lockdown was 5 o'clock on a Friday when we got together and had a couple of refreshments. But the serious part of that was the sharing of the information was very important amongst, ourselves, Zespri, the Fonterra guys, and what was going on and how we could actually help each other with our business issues. So, as Elizabeth said, that the relationships became very strong, and then inside the level of our own companies as well. I think that there was greater bonds and of support and trust that got built because we were relying on each other to help each other. There was no one else who's going to help us, and so I know that quite an maybe a strong level of loyalty was engendered amongst our staff, across the PCNZ staff, because we did a lot of things to try and help get food to their families. And that was thanks again across to the Zespri guys and the Fonterra guys, and it was a New Zealand community type of effort, and I think that built a lot of loyalty for New Zealand brands in China. And it's something that certainly we should all be very proud of for a long time into the future. So that was a very good thing that happened.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We've just coming up to the last minute. We've just got 1 minute left, so I'll continue that and let Tara and then Lawrence answer, and then I'll come back to you, Andrew, to wrap up.
Yep. I think, team, thanks. I think for me, I think what David and Elizabeth mentioned, that's a really well said. I think one thing I take it positively is that we no longer take it for granted for a lot of things. And it definitely, I feel we are more involved in our community, and we're more involved. We have more compassion for people around us. So I definitely think that inspire, business and brands continue to do good things and connecting people to live a better life, and I really enjoying it.
Right. Well said. The positive stuff, I got here is I think after the lockdown, the COVID, and we do have very strong team. Yeah. The team member we got here is they appreciate their job much more. They appreciate they have to transform and innovate, do a lot of change they never saw before. And another positive news I just got is confirmed the Avatar 2 will be played in China. So that's another positive for me. Thank you.
All right, back to you, Andrew. Do you want to close?
Yes, thanks, Tim. We're right on time. So just to wrap up, a massive thanks for the panel, Elizabeth, Tara, David, Lawrence for making time, and Tim and Fran for giving us this opportunity. And then just a couple of key points for me. I think that theme of China's speed and being resilient and agile while you're working at speed is critical. And the last sort of big thing for me there is I think when you've got teams on the ground, it's been a whole lot easier to work through these difficult situations and adversity. So well done to everybody for building their teams on the ground to take them through. And it'll be exciting to hear where everyone's at in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months time. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks very much, and thanks to your panel.